You're back. At least some of you are back. That's good to see. If you were with us last week, you'll know that we're in this season of soaking in the last events, the last hours of Jesus' life before his crucifixion. And I said to you, it's kind of like a mirror to our souls. All scripture is, but Lent, this 6 weeks, the season leading up to Easter, is particularly a strong mirror into our souls on so many levels. And if you're just checking out this church thing, I just want a little caveat. You're wondering who Jesus is. This is all new to you. You dared to darken the doors of a church. Congratulations for that. That's a brave move. You've picked the goriest time of the year to do that. This is the time of year where we literally sit with the gruesome details of the last hours of Jesus' life, which is not for the faint of heart. We revisit this annually. We call it Lent. Some churches call it Lent. And we do this specifically to reorient ourselves, to see again what Jesus endured for us. It's kind of weird, I think, for some people on the outside who aren't, soaked in church culture. You see that we often have crosses at the front of our churches, even on our church. We wear them around our neck, on our bumper stickers, tattooed. It's actually a form of torture and execution. And it's kind of weird. You probably wonder why on earth we do this. We wouldn't wear a guillotine around our neck or tattoo a hangman's noose on our bulging bicep. And I just invite you to hang with us, because at the end of this series, it will become clear why we do this. We know these events happened. And you might be asking, why do you have to revisit it? Why do we have to linger with this? It's kind of the way I feel about horror movies. I can never figure out why people pay hard-earned money and spend precious time to be terrorized. I mean, you just have to Google spiders and you can be terrorized, or parasitic wasps and be terrorized. Why spend that money and that time that you'll never get back just to be terrorized? Anyway, I'm an anomaly because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I realize that. But we don't do this. We don't linger. We don't sit with these events as some kind of entertainment or sick, sense of nostalgia. We engage with this tragedy to be reminded what Jesus endured for us, to awaken us again to the love of God, that the lengths that God would go to undo all of our false pretenses of what God is like, that God would rather submit to our violence than retaliate, that God would rather be killed than kill. And yet there's more. There's even more relevancy and urgency for us today. Those who consider ourselves to be Jesus followers, or at least aspiring Jesus followers. There's a relevancy for our current time and place in history, our geopolitical and socioeconomic location. You see, this is a story for today. The world needs this story. The church needs this story, because lurking in the shadows is an age-old seduction. It's the seduction of power. And you might think, oh, come on, I'm immune to that. I'm not seeking power. I'm not a powerful person. I'll never be in a place of influence or power or control. It's just not my thing. I just want to ask you to hold on. Hang in with us. This story is a mirror to our souls. Throughout Jesus' life, he continually exposed the religious establishment for what they really were, the clergy of the day. They had become this self-serving, self-interest group in cozy collusion with the Roman government. And now this self-interest group is masquerading as God's mouthpiece, lobbying the government for the death penalty for Jesus. And since they don't have the authority to execute themselves, they're relying on the government to do their dirty work for them. So Jesus has become much more than some kind of irritating inconvenience. He's actually become a threat to the religious establishment. He has eclipsed them as the primary influence over the people. They listened to Jesus. They flocked to Jesus. They come to Jesus. And that was threatening their power and their influence and their cushy lifestyle. You see, they feared losing influence over the people, losing influence and power with the Roman government. Ruth Haley Barton, she's just a beautiful author, teacher, minister, spiritual guide. She said this: once a person is living in a place of privilege, they will do anything they can to protect it. Anything they can to protect it. The passion narrative, that's what we call this story, the story of Jesus' final hours, exposes who and what we worship, who we follow. And to be crass, the religious of the day jumped in bed with the government of the day, and the child they produced was the execution of Jesus. We saw this during the Nazi regime, when the church colluded with Hitler for their own self-preservation, to preserve their position and their privilege. I mentioned that last week. We saw it in Rwanda. We saw it in South Africa. We see it in North America today, where the church is a lobby group, a voting bloc for political power. Once a person is living in a place of privilege, they will do anything they can to protect it. See, allegiance to Jesus is often inconvenient and dangerous. It threatens our power and our privilege and our position. And as we're tracing these final hours of Jesus' life, this last week, it's sobering. Jesus was abducted, you'll remember, we talked about last week. He was wrongfully arrested, not by a crime syndicate, not by a corrupt police force, by the clergy and their henchmen. And that was a hard reality to face. It was a difficult mirror to hold up, that it was the religious who rejected Jesus. The God followers of the day, they preferred their beliefs, their rituals, their traditions, their interpretation of Scripture, their homogeneous religion over Jesus. He wasn't welcome. He didn't fit their framework of what God was supposed to be like, of what the Messiah they expected was supposed to be like. In today's terms, Jesus wasn't welcome in the church. Let that soak in. Jesus wasn't welcome in the church. And that was a mirror that I asked you to stare into this past week, to examine ourselves, to allow it to read us, to reflect back to us. It was a mirror to our souls, our beliefs, our outlook. Do we earnestly seek truth, or do we desperately defend power, privilege, and position? And it comes disguised in so many forms. It is so hard to see. We need the mirror of this story to show us. And in a time like ours, when truth must be convenient, when it's sold to the highest bidder and manipulated to defend power, the truth of Jesus is excruciatingly inconvenient. It was for the religious gatekeepers of the day. Those they scorned. Those that were considered outside of, not worthy of religion or God. Those they looked down on were the ones who welcomed and received Jesus. And those who thought they were worthy, righteous, God followers on God's side, they're the ones who rejected God when God visited in the flesh. How can that be? It's a mirror to our own souls. And how dare Jesus challenge their interpretation of Scripture that they had held for centuries? How dare he invite and include and welcome those they didn't welcome, those who didn't fit, those who didn't follow all of the rituals, traditions, rules. And we pick up today where we left off last week. The chief priests and the teachers of the law, that was the Pope and the theologians, the pastors and the Bible teachers, condemned Jesus. And they set him up as an enemy of the state, an enemy of the government. They colluded with the government to have him executed. And I said last week, it gets uglier, and it does. It's going to keep getting uglier, actually, for the next couple of weeks. But today it gets way more personal. I'm going to summarize the first half of today's passage because it's long. And for the sake of time, I'll just summarize that. But it starts out with this. Then the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate. Look how easy that was. What do you think the chances are that Mark would get a hearing with the prime minister or the premier just like that? No background check, no call ahead, no red tape, no bureaucratic runaround. Just show up at the door. Do you think that's going to happen? That's an unholy alliance. That's a convenient companionship they've got going on here. They just show up at the governor's door. To be clear, the governor, Pilate, has zero interest in their religious affairs. He does not want to be the mediator of all of their internal religious squabbles. So they have to make these charges of interest to Pilate, of interest to the government. They have to make it political. They have to paint Jesus as a threat, not just to Rome, but an enemy of the state and bad for society. And if they could get Pilate to suspect Jesus of treason, then that would be it. They'd have him on their side. It had to be political. And so they claimed that he called himself the King of the Jews, which is a title Jesus never used for himself. Now, the word king, of course, would do it, wouldn't it? Because there is only one king in Rome, and that's Caesar, the emperor of Rome, except Herod, who was just a little puppet king of a backwater region. But you don't dare say you are king or think you're our king, because Caesar was king. And so claiming that he called himself to be king would do it. That's treason. That's crucifixion. And so Pilate asks, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Now, this question isn't theological, it's political. We have to remember that. He didn't ask him, "Are you the Messiah? Are you the deliverer? Are you the long-expected anointed one?" No. But do you claim to be the King of the Jews? A question you'd expect from someone loyal to the Roman government, someone who's looking to protect his own career, his own power. Pilate wants to know if Jesus is a political rival, if this peasant is going to disrupt the order of society, if he's going to threaten Pilate's career. Now that would be inconvenient. A yes by Jesus would implicate him in treason, and for sure he'd be headed for crucifixion. A no would be untrue. So Jesus masterfully puts the words back into Pilate's mouth. "You have said so." And when we read the text, we see that Pilate's very uncomfortable. He discovers, though, that Jesus is from Galilee. Now, Galilee, this is great news, because Galilee is ruled by what I just said, the puppet king Herod. And Herod just conveniently happens to be in town for Passover, and he despises Herod. So he can just pass this little mess over to Herod and let Herod deal with it. Is he delegating the problem away? Maybe. Sounds like it. Or maybe he's looking for a second opinion, so when things go south later, there's someone to shift the blame to. We will never know why Pilate did this. What we do know is that Jesus is a pawn in a very dangerous political game. Whatever motivation Pilate had, Herod is ecstatic because he's heard all these rumors about Jesus. Don't forget, Jesus ministered in the area that Herod had jurisdiction over, and he'd heard about the miracles, and he was longing to meet him. He wanted to see these magic tricks for himself. The problem was, as I said, Jesus ministered mostly in Galilee. He did his miracles in Galilee. The people in Galilee loved him. It would not go well for Herod to condemn their hero, to condemn the one they love. And so he mocks Jesus, and what does he do? Sends him right back over to Pilate. You see, Jesus is caught in this political drama. Herod's uncommitted, Pilate's unconvinced, and so he declares him innocent again. But Pilate's no idiot. He knows he's being played. He knows he's being manipulated by this religious mob. And so Luke says in verse 12, that day Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they'd been enemies. Luke just slips that in there. Just an interesting little detail, isn't it? Make no mistake, this is a friendship of political expediency. And that's where we pick up the story today. And so I'm going to be reading from Luke 23, starting at verse 13. I'll be reading from the New International Version. It's also in your YouVersion app, your Bible Gateway app. It'll be on the screen, and we'll pick up at verse 13. Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, and he said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I've examined him in your presence and have found no basis for your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. As you can see, he has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and then release him." But the whole crowd shouted, "Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us!" Now, Barabbas had been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again. But they kept shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." For the third time he spoke to them. "Why? What crime has this man committed? I have found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I will have him punished and then release him." Now, for some of you in your Bibles, you might have verse 17. Others of you, verse 17 is missing, and you just have a footnote. This is another example where various manuscripts have been discovered and put together, and scholars have decided what should go in and what shouldn't go in and what's original and what's not original. And if your publisher is honest, they'll have a footnote, and you'll see verse 17 included at the bottom of that passage. Barabbas' name is interesting. It means son. Bar means son, Abba means father or teacher in Aramaic. And so he's son of a father or son of a teacher. That's his last name. His first name is Jesus. Comes from the Hebrew word Yeshua, which means deliverer or savior. We get the name Joshua from that. And so if you are in Roman-occupied first century Israel, you name your sons Yeshua. You name your sons Jesus, because you are looking for that deliverer, that savior, that redeemer. And he was a folk hero. He was brave enough to stand up to Rome, brave enough to stand up for the rights of the Jews. He was valiant enough to kill for them. Which one do you choose? Pilate asks. It's a question that rings through the centuries. Jesus Barabbas or Jesus of Nazareth? Jesus, son of a father, or Jesus, son of God? Which one do you want? Which one fits your lifestyle, your dreams, your ideologies? Jesus Barabbas was a revolutionary, an insurrectionist, a freedom fighter. He incited revolts against Rome, and he's on death row for treason, which means he's headed for crucifixion. He actually may have known Jesus of Nazareth. Maybe he lurked in the background of the crowds at some of Jesus' sermons as he preached throughout the 3 years of his ministry, wondering, who is this strange freedom fighter that everybody's talking about? And had the drama played out any longer, perhaps they would have been cellmates on death row. I wonder, would they have argued about peace and justice and freedom for Israel and how to achieve it? There are two brands of deliverer on trial here. Jesus Barabbas, whose goal was to restore the kingdom of Israel and enact revenge on their enemies, or Jesus of Nazareth, who came to inaugurate the kingdom of God for the world and offer forgiveness to enemies. Pilate's in a pickle, right? He knows he's being played by this mob. Should he execute this innocent man? It's not that he's above that. He's no moral icon, to be sure. But there's something in his spirit. He knows something's up here. He knows he's stuck in the middle. Or does he release him and risk protest and violence in the streets? Something that could jeopardize his political aspirations. He's stuck. He's trapped in the politics of a system of privilege and self-preservation. And look what Luke says. But with loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will. He's a politician backed into a corner. He fears the crowds. He fears disorder and the wrath of Rome. He fears for his own career and reputation, and he feels defenseless. What did preservation of power require for each of these players in this drama? Colluding? Complicity? Killing? The religious establishment colluded. The people were complicit. And the government, the power, killed. What does preservation of power cost? Compromising truth, violating justice. Pilate knew Jesus was innocent. Herod knew Jesus was innocent. The religious establishment knew he was innocent. The people knew he was innocent. Everyone there knew the truth. But Barabbas, aligned with their political dreams, their political agenda. Jesus of Nazareth did not. Barabbas aligned with their love of power. Jesus of Nazareth with the power of love. They adored Jesus of Nazareth, but they idolized Barabbas. They were fans of Jesus of Nazareth. They were followers of Barabbas. We sit comfortably, don't we? 2,000 years removed after the resurrection, and we wonder with amazement, disgust even, how could they? How could they miss this? How could they do this? And we're astonished at the blindness of the religious establishment and the fickleness of the crowds. But yet we underestimate the depth to which this political, military brand of Messiah had infiltrated and embedded their hopes and dreams and expectations, how it had embedded their religious worldview, their theology, and maybe ours. It's a crowd of Judases and Peters and us. The crowd was faced with a choice. Barabbas or Jesus of Nazareth? Freedom fighter or freedom giver? Which did they want? Which version of deliverer would they choose? The one who will kill for Israel or the one who will die for the world? The one who offers power and revenge to enemies, or the one who divests himself of power and forgives enemies? The one who seduces with pseudo-peace through the myth of redemptive violence, or the one who promises lasting peace through self-sacrifice and radical, reckless generosity and love? Barabbas conveniently feeds their lust for power and privilege and position. Jesus of Nazareth inconveniently challenges to peace and justice with weapons of forgiveness, love and self-sacrifice, weapons that don't achieve political ends, political power, but satiate revenge. The justice and peace that Jesus offers is messy, and it's horribly inconvenient. We have a family here at Lakeside who made that choice to follow Jesus of Nazareth, and they had to live in hiding for 10 years or risk being killed. It's costly. It's messy. It means turning the other cheek when we're insulted or slandered. It means standing in solidarity with those who are oppressed or marginalized, even when it costs us. It means giving more than what's demanded of us. It means loving our enemies, blessing those who curse us. Some of us here feel that intensely these days. It means speaking out against injustice when you could get killed, at least even canceled. rejected, ostracized. Last week I said that the Passion story, this whole Lent season, is an uncomfortable mirror. You know those mirrors that have like 10 times the magnification? You lift them up and it's just like, wah, scares the life out of you. Where did that come from? You wonder, why do we do that? Why do we hold up a mirror that exposes everything and all of its whatever? Because we want to remove that hair, right? That's not in the right place. We want to get rid of that zit or that fuzz in our eyeball. That's why we do it. Do we dare hold up this mirror of the Passion story and look deeply in it? Do we dare do that? Their interest was self-serving. They wanted someone who would fight for them now, who would make their lives more comfortable now, who would use the weapons that they liked, the weapons they trusted, the weapons that would secure immediate results, to protect their privilege, to gain a voice in the halls of power. Do they want Jesus, Son of the Father, or Jesus, Son of our Father? Do they want Jesus, the teacher, or Jesus, son of a teacher? The crowd was faced with a choice that day between Jesus Barabbas, this violent insurrectionist, and Jesus of Nazareth, God in the flesh, love incarnate. The choice seems so obvious to us 2,000 years later. It was a choice between sacrificing justice to secure power or securing justice at the expense of power. Sacrificing justice to secure power or securing justice at the expense of power. And if this narrative demonstrates anything, it demonstrates that once a person is living in a place of privilege, they will do anything they can to protect it. This is a pervasive and universal lust within all of us to resort to power and control, to find security in power and control, in what suits our desires and what protects our interests. Pilate's question echoes hauntingly through the centuries. Do you want Jesus Barabbas, or do you want Jesus, the Son of God? And we might do well to pause and consider, how well do our lives reflect the Jesus we claim to follow? We all have this tendency to recreate Jesus in our own image, to co-opt him for our personal agendas and desires and political, whether that's political, personal, military, social, financial. Jesus wants us all to be rich and successful, doesn't he? I chat with people regularly who, when they look back on their lives, they describe their experience of faith or church or religious upbringing as more like Jesus Barabbas. They loved Jesus, but they were seduced by this culture of culture wars and power and influence that looked more like Jesus Barabbas versus Rome than Jesus of Nazareth. Power and control is subtle, has many disguises. We have to always be on our guard, always looking in the mirror. Jesus becomes a brand, and the cross, its logo. And it's not new. 2,000 years ago, the people attempted to co-opt the message for their own personal and political goals. And when faced with two messiahs, they chose the one that served their political ends, their ideologies, their agendas. And it's too easy to separate ourselves from this story. We weren't there. It wasn't our choice. We wouldn't have done that had we been there. We console ourselves. But wouldn't we? That question haunts me. What would I have done if I'd been in that crowd? We don't have to wonder, though, what we would do, because we have that choice every single day. We're faced with the same choice between Jesus Barabbas and Jesus of Nazareth, son of a father or son of God, Jesus of the sword or Jesus of the cross. And every day we have choices to make relationally, choosing to forgive over resentment. The way we shop, the freedom of child slaves over our favorite chocolate bar, choosing meekness over power. Must we have the last word in every debate, in person or on social media? Justice over collusion or willful ignorance might mean voting differently, voting for that which will benefit others over myself. The list goes on and on. If we sat in a room, we could come up with a very, very long list of what does it mean? What choices do we have between Jesus Barabbas and Jesus of Nazareth? See, following Jesus is not about demanding Christian rights. That's Jesus Barabbas. It's about following Jesus of the cross. It's about dying to self for the sake of others. What does that look like? That's the big question. What does that look like for each one of us, for a church here at Lakeside? You see, Jesus isn't an addendum. He's not some accessory that we add to our lives. Actually, he's an inconvenience. Gets in the way of ourselves. He gets us mocked, maybe even gets us killed. Challenges our privilege. And I can suggest that if Jesus isn't an inconvenience in our lives, it's not Jesus of Nazareth that we're following. 2,000 years ago, Pilate asked, who do you choose? Jesus Barabbas or Jesus of Nazareth? 2,000 years later, Jesus is asking, who do you choose? Barabbas or me? The crowd's dilemma was which Jesus endorses their ideology and fulfills their dreams. Our dilemma is whose ideology will we endorse? There were two Jesuses on trial that fateful Friday. We know which Jesus was chosen. Which Jesus would we choose? Which Jesus do we choose? I wonder if we can sit with that for a few moments as James plays. Just ask ourselves, is how I live true to Jesus of the cross? Is how I live true to the kind of self-giving lifestyle that he calls me to? And when I hold up the mirror of this choice, what do I see lurking in the shadows? Is there a seduction there of privilege, desiring influence and position? Which Jesus are we really following? Jesus, thank you for your always grace. Thank you that your door is always open. And regardless of our failures, our mistakes, our regrets, you open your arms and you welcome us as we are. Because we are loved. Because you love us enough that you allowed us to nail you to a cross to show us the heart of God. pray you'd empower us this week as we move out. We consider, which Jesus are we really following? Amen. Sharon and Sam will be at the crosses at the front if you'd like to process any of this, if you'd like to know more about following Jesus of Nazareth. If you want someone to pray for you or pray with you, they're here and they would love to do that. And I just invite you to join us next week as this saga continues, as we unpack more of this and the human nature that's on display in this story. And so I just want to bless you as you leave, as you go, hang out in the foyer, enjoy time together. Friends, go in the power of love as you seek to follow Jesus of Nazareth. And those who are coming to Lakeside 101, I'll meet you in the cafe, and we're looking forward to that. We love you, friends. Have a great week.